Hello, I'm Chelsea with Pink Door Fabrics, and we are talking Queen of Diamonds. So I know life gets in the way, it's the holidays, so some of you may not be fully caught up. Don't stress about it. It's a great activity to take with you while you're traveling, maybe for the holidays, or if you need a little quiet time from your family. So don't stress if you're not fully caught up. Today we're going to talk about the blocks for month 7 and 8. I apologize, things got a little away from us during the holiday, and so we missed our video for month 7. So we're going to talk about both of those. At this point, you have a really great foundation for English paper piecing and know all the things. Same principles apply to these months moving forward as they have previously. So we're just going to talk specifically about some of these blocks. So for month 7, this applies only if you bought your kit as a full block of the month from a shop. So if you did that, we realized that there was an issue with the repeat on the lions, the orange lions. And what happened, these were cut as quarter yards by the manufacturer. And so we realized depending on where that cut hit, you may not be able to get 2 full lions out of that. So we cut lots and lots and lots of little circles. So you might see 2 circles in your kit. So if you bought that through a retailer that bought it from Free Spirit Fabrics, even if you were international, you should receive 2 big circle pieces. Unfortunately, I don't have any here with me, but because we sent them all out, you should be receiving those even in addition to receiving a cut of this lion piece. So those were meant so that you could fussy cut these pieces for full heads in your block 7-3 and 7-4. Of course, bad luck would be that you needed 2 of those for that month, so that meant double the circles, but life is all good now that we're done cutting circles. Here's my template. So what you're going to do with those, excuse me, it's your X template, and this one doesn't have tape on it yet because I pulled it out of the bag, but this will allow you to take those circles. Like I said, we spent a lot of time fussy cutting those so that you can get your full lion head fussy cut focal point out of that lion. So you should be good to go. If you have any problems, let us know, but that's why those 2 extra circle pieces were in there, so that that can be accomplished. So those should have come, like I said, in your month 7 package from your retailer. Excuse me. And so the rest of that month is really straightforward. We're doing 2 of those. That's kind of the hardest part of that. 7-2, you're doing much the same. This is another one of those corner triangles that you're doing, or sort of setting triangles. And so same thing here. We've talked a little bit about how the pigment ink on those stripes can be a little thick to sew through. And so if you alternate that and make the stripes kind of go paint to printed versus paint to paint on those stripes, then that might make it a little bit easier. However you decide to do that is totally fine. If you had an extra line and wanted to do an extra focal print in there, I've seen some people do that and it works well. The FedEx guy is showing up any minute. So if you hear the doors dinging and things clanking, it's more fabric coming. So the only other little piece that I wanted to talk about for this month are your J triangles. So you'll see with that dot, the palm in Moonbeam. No, it should be lunar. You'll notice that when you go to lay your J template on it, again, same principle is going to apply here of trying to find that focal point. So I actually aligned this top and this top with the very edge of this circle down here and this circle up here, and that'll give you to make sure that your circle is centered, which is what you're trying to do with these pieces. So you are going to see just a little snippet of the circles coming on the top and the bottom because of the repeat of that print. So same thing there. We've drawn on our little templates a circle. That way you take the one and you lay it on top of your next circle so that all of them are totally identical. the rest of it, there's not a ton of fussy cutting for this beyond those 2 lions. So not too much to go over there. And then we get into month 8. So I know this is working a little bit ahead of where Tula's at, but it's all fine. We're shipping month 8. She'll be doing her video for month 8 in the next couple weeks, so don't stress. But one thing I wanted to go over with this particular block, which is block 8-1, is that these giraffes, you'll notice when you look at your fabric, look different ways. So these 2 look at each other. These 2 are looking straight ahead. This one, I'm sorry, these 2 are the same. These 3 are the same, and this guy is different. So the best way to do this, I would cut these 2 first. And so we're going to talk about a little bit of a trick with that. So let me grab my giraffe print here. And you have quite a bit of this. One of the things that I would also recommend is the repeat on these are fairly large, because you'll see some of them look whatever that direction is on video. I'll just say this direction, and the others are the mirror image of that. So you might want to kind of plan this out before you go to town hacking this up. Now, you can do this any way you want. You don't have to make your lions go the exact same direction that we do, but if you want to, what I'm going to recommend is these are the E pieces. And of course, I got the wrong template out. So let me grab those. Here's my E template. And I've got my little Sharpie. And so what I'm going to do is the ones that, let's do this one that's on your bottom left here. He's facing right. So what I'm going to do is look for the piece on my giraffe print that he's looking right. And what I'm going to do, and I'll show this to you in just a second. Let me draw it. And I'm going to center him in there just the way I want him, so that I get kind of his whole face centered. And what we're going to do is I'm going to draw an outline on this of where kind of his head lies, because when we flip it over and go to the one that's, so of course I wear a black shirt today, poor choice, but hopefully you can see that. And what I'll do is I'll hold it up on this little piece of solid so you can see it well. So I've basically just done a really quick, simple outline of where his head sits so that I can cut that piece out. Now, this is on one side of this. The trick here is if you need the mirror image of that, so we did the little guy that's facing right. If you need the guy that's facing left, so you're just going to take this, flip it over, and you've got the mirror image of that. And it will match perfectly. You don't have to try to align it again. It'll match perfectly for the guy facing left. So that's a really easy way. I won't hack this whole piece up. But that's the really easy way to make all of these identical. I did this with Sharpie. I failed to bring one with me to my video location right here. But what you can do is just take a little alcohol swab and it wipes right off. So then what I do is I'd cut the 2 inverse mirror pieces that I need. And then for the ones that face forward, I would do exactly the same thing. Trace one of them that's facing forward where you like the placement of it, and then you'll just move this around on your fabric so that all of them are identical. When we were making this, I was doing this in a hurry and didn't do that, and one guy's head was a little higher than the other. So this is a great way to make sure that all of them, especially because you're going to be seeing them side to side, you really want all of them to be perfect. So that's a great way to do that. These stripes might look like they're fussy cut, they're not. So however, you can drive yourself crazy trying to fussy cut the lazy stripes, so don't stress about that. These little pieces, you're really going to want to pay attention to where your tails lie with that. And so if you cut all those, I would line them up in little rows of 6. That way when you're basting, we talked about this in the beginning and Tula covered it much more in depth than I did. But that way all of your tails will spin in that center. I don't have one finished, but that'll make that center, because there's a lot of those coming together in one point, make that easier. Now, I don't know if we've talked about this, but one thing I really like to do with these 6-pointed star situations, especially with this one, is you really want that star in the center to be perfect. You want those points to match. So what I do is I would sew this left point to the middle point and then sew it to that one. And because I'm lazy and I like to do as few thread and needle changes as possible, I take this guy and fold it with this and sew this line coming down to that center point. And then you can just attach this one to that, and you don't have to switch thread. It's a single continuous line of stitching that you're gonna do, and then trim that off and you'll have half of that 6-pointed star. I like to take that, do the same thing for the bottom, and attach those 2 stars. We talked about this it's been a while now. But where you're gonna wanna make those center points line up. I clip it, or I will even just do a really quick little tacking stitch there. That way that's the point that you really want to match up. I'll tack it there and then go back to fold the top to the bottom and sew those together, and that way your point in the center will match perfectly. So that's a good trick for that. And then we've got another Fussy Cut Giraffe. You can make him go whichever direction you would like. And then with block 8-3, these elephants, like we've talked about a little bit before, when we designed this quilt, we didn't have all of this fabric in hand yet. And so you're gonna run into a little bit of that same issue where, let me pull my elephants out of here. Hold, please. You're gonna run into a little bit of that same issue where you may not be able to get quite as much in it as you see in our digital rendering. Not to stress, you can do this however you would like. If you like his face better or his butt better, whichever piece strikes your fancy, you can certainly go with that. Or let's say that you're not a huge elephant fan, totally fine. You could do some of these flowers. And so as you'll see, you may not be able to get that whole elephant. Let's pretend that we're doing this here. You're gonna get more of his back. You can't quite get his full back end in there. So don't stress, we've talked about this. This is part of a little bit of the challenge of designing these things before we have final fabric in hand. So you can do whatever piece you like best out of this all ears print for that. And these stripes, same thing that we've talked about before. I would mark your B template, just pick a place, and I centered, let's say that I've got my little B template here. On my stripe, I would center that, in the way that we designed this is, let's see here, I just want to make sure that I've got this right before. So you could measure this. I usually eyeball it pretty closely. And so when you lay this down, you're just going to pick a point, and same thing. To make all of these identical, I think it's easiest. Let me move this out of the way and I'll demo for you. Pick a spot, and same thing like we've talked about. I have this already doubled up. If you've got a good sharp rotary blade in your cutter, what you could do is make sure that this is perfect from front to back. Remember we've talked about this, where you might have to shift it just a little bit, but as long as those stripes line up from your front to your back, you are going to end up with the perfect mirror image of that. And that's really what these are all not necessarily mirrors, but you're gonna end up with 4 identical pieces. So I'm gonna lay these down so that they're identical. I'm gonna make sure that the amount of, and it works out, I'll show you in just 2 seconds, really well, that this tall point here and this tall point there actually end up hitting just right on a stripe. And that makes this centered on that, so that when you cut those, they'll all be identical. So let's say that you can only get through 2 layers at a time. I'm just gonna cut these so that I can show you. And I don't know that we've talked about that either. One thing that can make, especially with some of those little G triangle or G diamonds that are the little tiny ones, I really love these Clover 28mm rotary cutters. I've used the 18s and I think I have chubby little hands, so I think they're hard to hold on to, but I like the weight of this because it's kind of ergonomically designed. But when you're going around smaller templates, I think it's easier to use a smaller rotary blade. Not to say that you can't use a 45, but I just think these are pretty handy to make that happen. So I use these a lot. In fact, most of my English paper piecing cutting, I'm using a smaller rotary cutter just because it's faster, and you know, if you've got your hands on there, you're not running over your fingers and that sort of thing. So as you can see, I cut those and I've ended up with the complete inverse of that. So when you go to put these together, these points, and again, you might want to take this, and it would be a good choice. I won't do this with my Sharpie. I don't have my other little friction pen. But like we've talked about, when you go to baste these pieces so that they're totally identical and you get those nice sharp points, what you're gonna do is you've got your seam allowance here, your 3/8 inch. You can either use your ruler and put it down on the 3/8, or I think this is the better way to do this. Pretend like this is a friction and not a Sharpie. What I do is I just lay this seam allowance right on the edge of my fabric, and this will give you that mark for the 3/8 inch. What I'm gonna do is just draw a little tiny line there. And again, I would use a friction pen or some sort of fabric marking pen rather than a Sharpie. So don't do as I say, not as I do. And I'm just gonna mark where those lines or that seam allowance is going to intersect for all these. And then when I lay my paper down on the inside of it, I'll know exactly where those 4 corners are going to hit. Yeah, there we go. See how I've got those little lines? So when I go to baste those papers, it takes a little extra time to mark it, but once you get those down, then you're sure that they're gonna, hit exactly where you need it. And these stripes, these took a little figuring in the beginning. You end up with these like really dainty little pieces, but it gives this kind of chevron appearance, which we thought was really cool. So it takes a little bit of extra time to mark those, but I think is really, really worth it so that you can achieve that same aesthetic. So the only other thing that I want to mention for this is that we have these little asterisks here, and what we did, you can see these here, those just denoted the different color. Now, glitter and giggles are very, very close in shade. So what we wanted you to notice with the asterisk, well, here you'll see you cut 2 A's and 2 C's, and here's how those alternate so that it sort of looks like you'll see the color difference much more in real life than you will in that rendering, because it's hard to get those just right. But as you can see, there's a subtle shade difference between those two, and that way it'll help you know which one is which when you go there. So if you get them confused, it's not the end of the world. Just pick the alternate color, and so we wanted them to kind of look like it gives this fun little hourglass alternating color. So just use the inverse of whatever's on top, and in case you don't know which color's which in your kit. So we're almost there. We've made it a long way with this. If you're still catching up or just joining us, that's totally fine. We're in this for the long haul. English paper pieced quilts are not meant to be done. It's not quilt in a day. It's more like quilt in a year. So we are enjoying this with you. Please reach out if there's anything you'd like us to cover in future videos. We certainly like to cover those. One thing I did want to say is in your final installment, again, we've talked about this. So you've already received your Mick Jaguar print, which are the little borders that go around your blocks, this multicolor, and you can refer back to earlier videos about how we made those. We sort of fussy cut those strips so that they would match the interior colors of that block. But in your final installment of your block of the month, you're going to be receiving the white sashing. And so we're going over all of that at a future date. So don't stress that you don't have that. That's coming in the final installment, and we'll be talking about that in much greater depth on how to do those. So happy holidays from all of us at Pink Door Fabrics and Paper Pieces and Free Spirit Fabrics as well.